There is a moment when you look into the eyes of a dog and you are struck by something that is both profoundly familiar and entirely alien. It is not merely affection or loyalty you see reflected there. It is an unspoken recognition, an echo of the eternal self that stretches far beyond the confines of human consciousness. When I speak of the self, I do not refer to the surface personality, the ego that clings to its titles, achievements, and fears. I speak of the self as the totality of being, the mysterious union of conscious and unconscious, the archetypal root that holds within it both light and shadow, divinity and instinct. In the gaze of a dog, that self peers back at us. Stripped of the human masks, we so desperately cling to animals, especially dogs, possess a quality that our modern, overly rational minds have long forgotten the ability to be wholly present in the mystery of life. When you observe a dog lying under the sun, every fiber of its being is absorbed by the warmth, the sense of the earth, the simple rhythm of breath. There is no striving to become, no projection into an imagined future. This presence is not naivety, it is a kind of primordial wisdom, an instinctive harmony with the deep forces of existence. We, as humans, often stand outside this harmony, alienated by our relentless thinking and our need to define and categorize the world. Yet, when you lock eyes with a dog, there is a crack in that alienation, a fleeting doorway into something deeper. I often wonder if the soul of a dog is less burdened than ours because it is closer to the collective unconscious, that great reservoir of archetypes and symbols which underlies all living things. In dreams, animals frequently appear as guides, messengers from the depths of our psyche. A black dog may slink out of the shadows of a dream, not as a mere animal, but as a symbol of our own shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves we fear, deny, or repress. A white dog might emerge as a companion spirit, representing loyalty, instinctual purity, or the guidance of a deeper self. Dogs, in their living form, remind us of these dream images made flesh, walking among us as if to call forth something ancient and forgotten within us. The gaze of a dog is particularly powerful because it is unencumbered by the layers of social masks that humans wear. When a dog looks at you, it does not see your status or your failures. It sees in essence a vibration of presence that lies beneath your constructed identity. This can be deeply unsettling for those who are not at ease with themselves, for in the silence of that gaze, something within you is revealed. It is as though the dog sees the part of you that even you have neglected to acknowledge, the vulnerable child. The wild animal, the lost soul seeking connection. We must not romanticize animals as being merely symbols of purity or innocence. They are also embodiments of raw instinct, of the primal forces that run beneath all life. A dog's gaze can remind you not only of your capacity for love, but also of your capacity for aggression, hunger, and survival. This is why some people feel an inexplicable discomfort when looked at by an animal. The animal sees not just who you wish to be, but who you are in your most unvarnished form. It peers into the subconscious and brings forth what you might prefer to leave hidden When I speak of the self, I refer to the wholeness of being, the union of opposites, the reconciliation of our animal instincts with our spiritual yearnings. The dog, in many ways, stands as a bridge between these realms. It walks a line between the wild and the domestic, the instinctual and the relational. In its loyalty, it reflects our longing for belonging. And in its independence, it reminds us of the untamed spirit that cannot be fully domesticated. To truly see the self in a dog's eyes is to confront your own paradoxical nature, to understand that you are both an animal and something more than animal, both a creature of earth and a vessel of the infinite. In many mythologies, dogs are not mere companions, but guardians of thresholds. Think of Cerberus, the hound that stands at the gates of the underworld, or the black dogs of Celtic folklore that haunt the crossroads between life and death. Such symbols remind us that dogs are not only reflections of comfort and loyalty, they are also gatekeepers to the unseen. When you look into a dog's eyes, you may feel a strange sensation, as though it is inviting you to step beyond the ordinary and into the numinous. This is not a trick of the imagination. It is an archetypal truth, a reminder that the boundaries between species, between worlds, are not as rigid as we believe. I have often said that the unconscious is not just a personal reservoir of forgotten memories, but a living, breathing reality that pulses beneath all of existence. Animals are attuned to this reality in ways we can scarcely understand. A dog will sense an earthquake before it happens, will detect the shifts in your mood before you even realize them yourself. They live in a field of intuition, a kind of direct knowing that bypasses the intellect. This is why when a dog gazes at you, it sometimes feels as though it is reading a script written deep within your psyche, a script you have not even begun to decipher. Perhaps this is why so many people who are struggling with grief, loneliness, or trauma find solace in the presence of a dog. The dog does not demand that you explain yourself. It does not ask for the narrative of your suffering. It simply sits with you, its presence, a mirror to the part of you that longs to be seen without judgment. This is a profound spiritual act. For what is the essence of healing, if not being seen, truly seen, by something that acknowledges both your brokenness and your beauty? We humans have built walls around our souls. We hide behind words, rationalizations, and roles, but the dog, in its simplicity, bypasses all of this. It looks at you and something ancient within you stirs, something that whispers, you are not what you pretend to be. You are more. This is not a sentimental projection. It is an archetypal encounter. The dog becomes a kind of psychopomp, guiding you toward a deeper communion with your own self in dreams. I have seen dogs appear not only as protectors, but as challengers. They may guard a treasure or a hidden truth, daring the dreamer to approach. The treasure, of course, is never something external. It is always the lost fragment of the soul, the piece of ourselves we have exiled to pass the dog in the dream. One must meet its gaze, must confront the instinctual energy it represents. And in doing so, reclaim the part of oneself that was buried. When you meet a dog's eyes in waking life, you are, in some subtle way, reenacting this same journey. You are asked to look beyond appearances and into the living mystery that dwells in every creature. I believe that the soul connection between humans and dogs is not accidental. It is no coincidence that for thousands of years our species have walked side by side, sharing warmth, labor, and companionship. On a deeper level, dogs remind us of the aspects of ourselves we have lost in our pursuit of civilization, our attunement to nature, our instinctual intelligence, our capacity for unconditional presence. When a dog greets you with unrestrained joy, tail wagging, eyes bright, it is not simply displaying affection. It is inviting you to remember what it means to be fully alive, to feel without the burden of self-consciousness. To speak of the soul connection with the dog is to speak of the soul itself, that elusive, ungraspable essence which modern psychology often attempts to reduce to a set of behaviors or neural patterns. But the soul cannot be measured by instruments nor dissected by logic. It is a living mystery, a flame that flickers behind the eyes. When you encounter a dog's gaze, you are witnessing a soul that, though different in its expression, vibrates with the same primordial life force that animates your own being. This recognition is not an intellectual act. It is felt as though something deep within your unconscious suddenly awakens and says, I know you. We come from the same source. There is something humbling in the simplicity of this recognition. Dogs do not ponder the meaning of existence, yet they embody a wisdom that our minds often obscure. They move with instinct, respond to the rhythms of the earth, and give themselves fully to each moment. We, in contrast, are often paralyzed by our need to analyze, to control, to shape reality to our own designs. But when a dog rests its head against your knee, there is a silent teaching being offered to be present, to trust the flow of life. To remember that the world is not something to conquer, but something to enter with open awareness. I have observed how the presence of a dog can alter the atmosphere of a room. People who are tense, locked in their egos, suddenly soften when the dog approaches. Their guardedness falls away, replaced by a genuine warmth that requires no explanation. This is because the dog connects directly with the archetypal layer of the psyche, bypassing the defenses of the conscious mind. In Jungian terms, the dog is like an emissary of the collective unconscious, carrying the energy of ancient symbols, loyalty, protection, the wild, the guide. We do not simply see a dog, we feel its archetypal resonance, which awakens something buried within us. I recall a dream once described to me where a man found himself lost in a dense forest at night. He wandered aimlessly, surrounded by shadows and fear. Suddenly, a dog appeared, its fur black as the void, his eyes gleaming like distant stars. The dog did not bark, did not threaten, but merely stared at him with a gaze that seemed to pierce through his confusion. He felt both terror and relief, as if this creature knew his soul better than he did. When he followed the dog, it led him to a clearing where the moonlight revealed a path home. This dream, like so many others, speaks of the dog as a guide through the wilderness of the psyche. The black dog in this vision was not just an animal, it was the shadow self transformed into a companion, leading the dreamer toward inner integration in our waking lives. Dogs often play this same role. They sense the emotional undercurrents that we try to suppress. They know when we are afraid, sad, or restless, often before we admit these states to ourselves. It is as if their instincts are attuned to the whispers of our unconscious, and perhaps they are, for the dog's consciousness is not fragmented in the way ours is. It is not divided between past and future, ego and persona. The dog is whole, and in its wholeness, it calls forth the hidden wholeness within us. When we speak of the self in Jungian psychology, we speak of the totality of our being, the union of conscious and unconscious, the integration of all opposites. Most people live their lives identified with the ego, that narrow fragment of consciousness that sees itself as separate from the rest of existence. But the self is vast, like an ocean, and the ego is only a single wave upon its surface. The dog, in its simple, unself-conscious way, reflects this greater totality. It does not pretend to be more than it is. It does not wear a mask. In its eyes, you see not only instinct, but also a kind of innocence that arises from living in harmony with what is. There is an old saying that the eyes are the window to the soul. When you look into a dog's eyes, you see a soul that is neither bound by human complexity nor devoid of mystery. It is a soul that moves with both wildness and tenderness, one that feels deeply without the need for words. This is why so many people are drawn to animals in times of crisis. A dog's gaze can pierce through the fog of despair, not because it offers solutions, but because it reminds you that beneath all the chaos of thought and emotion, there is a raw, unbroken essence that remains untouched. Yet, we must not forget that the connection we feel with a dog also confronts us with our own shadows. A dog's loyalty can highlight our own betrayals. Its openness can expose our fear of vulnerability. Its instinctual life can remind us of the instincts we have denied or suppressed. When a dog bares its teeth, it is not acting out of malice, but from the clarity of survival. We, however, often turn our aggression inward, poisoning our own spirits with self-hatred. The dog, in this sense, teaches us to acknowledge our instincts without shame, to integrate rather than repress the animal within us. In many cultures, dogs are linked with the afterlife, with the crossing of boundaries between the living and the dead. This is not a mere superstition. It reflects an archetypal truth. The dog is a threshold guardian, a creature that stands at the liminal edge where the known meets the unknown. When you look into its eyes, you may feel a strange awareness of eternity, as though for a brief moment you are being reminded of your own mortality, your own spiritual journey. It is no coincidence that therapy dogs are used in hospitals and hospices. Their presence is not just comforting, it is symbolic. They guide the soul to a place of acceptance, to a recognition that life and death are part of a greater mystery. Have you ever noticed how a dog can stare into nothing, as if seeing something beyond your perception? Perhaps it is nothing more than a sound, a scent, a shadow, or perhaps it is perceiving what we have lost, the ability to sense the subtle movements of life that exist beyond the threshold of conscious awareness. This is why when a dog looks at you, there is sometimes an uncanny feeling as though it is not merely looking, but perceiving the depth of who you are. You cannot hide from this gaze. You cannot disguise your true state of being. The dog does not care for your persona, only for the reality beneath it. I believe this is why people form such deep bonds with their dogs. A dog accepts you without question, without the conditions and judgments that often come from human relationships. This acceptance is not superficial. It is rooted in the recognition of your essence. When a dog leans against you or curls up at your feet, it is an affirmation of connection, a silent reminder that you belong not because of what you achieve, but simply because you are. And in that moment, something within you begins to heal. The dog, in its gaze, teaches us about the soul's longing for wholeness. It teaches us about trust, about the courage to be fully present in our own skin. It teaches us that love is not a transaction, but a state of being, a natural flow that arises when two souls meet without masks. When you look back into a dog's eyes, you are not just seeing an animal, you are seeing a reflection of your own capacity for unconditional presence. You are seeing the self mirrored in a form that is both foreign and profoundly intimate. There is a certain sacredness in the silence between you and the dog. It is a silence that does not demand explanation or confession. It does not ask you to justify who you are, to prove your worth, or to perform your identity. It is simply there, like a mirror reflecting what lies beneath the surface of all your striving and self-deception. In that quiet exchange of glances, you might feel a stirring within you, as though something ancient and unnameable is awakening, a memory of a time when you, too, lived with unguarded instinct, before the walls of ego and culture rose around your being. In the psychology of archetypes, every animal we encounter resonates with a deeper symbolic significance. Dogs, perhaps more than any other animal, represent the duality of nature and nurture, the wild and the domestic, the guardian and the companion. They are neither wholly wild like the wolf, nor entirely subdued like a caged creature. They stand between worlds, a bridge between primal instinct and conscious relationship. When you look into their eyes, you may sense this duality, as though behind their loyalty there still lingers the whisper of the wild forest, the distant call of something untamed. This duality is also present within you. You are not only a social creature, but also a being of wild instincts, dreams, and forgotten truths. The modern human suffers greatly from the repression of this wildness. We have been taught to fear our instincts, to mistrust our inner voices, to suppress everything that does not fit neatly into the order of society. Yet, the unconscious does not disappear simply because we deny it. It continues to live beneath the surface, manifesting in dreams, in moods, in sudden impulses we cannot explain. The dog, with its sharp senses and unfiltered nature, becomes a living reminder of this inner life. When it gazes at you, there is no judgment, only recognition, a silent acknowledgement of the animal within you, which still longs for freedom, for connection, for a life aligned with the deeper rhythms of the earth. I have often spoken of the shadow, that part of the psyche which contains everything we reject or deny about ourselves. The shadow is not inherently evil. It is simply the unlived life, the forgotten parts of our soul. Dogs, in many ways, have a natural relationship with their own shadow. They do not pretend to be what they are not. They do not hide their anger, their joy, or their fear. They embody their instincts without shame or pretense. This is why, when you look into a dog's eyes, you may feel a strange sense of being seen. Not by the persona you project to the world, but by the parts of yourself you often keep hidden. The dog's gaze penetrates the facade, touching something raw and unguarded within you. There is a reason why in myth and folklore, dogs are often portrayed as guardians of the soul. They appear at crossroads, at the gates of other worlds, as if to say, Topaz, you must face what lies within. In ancient Egypt, Anubis, the god with the head of a jackal, was the one who weighed the hearts of the dead, determining their readiness for the afterlife. In Greek mythology, Cerberus guarded the entrance to Hades, allowing no one to pass without confronting the truth of death. These images speak to a deep psychological truth. The dog, whether real or symbolic, calls us to confront the threshold of transformation. It asks us to meet the mystery of the self, which lies beyond the ego's narrow vision. I have seen how the eyes of a dog can bring tears to someone who thought they had no tears left. A soldier returning from war, hardened by violence and loss, suddenly collapses into tenderness when his dog runs to greet him, a lonely child, abandoned by the world of adults, finds in the dog's gaze a love that is not conditional or performative. This is the power of the archetype made flesh. It is not the dog itself, but the symbolic energy it carries that stirs the depths of the psyche. The dog reminds us that there is a place within us where love flows naturally, without calculation or fear. To live without contact with this deeper dimension is to live as a fragmented being, cut off from the totality of the self. We spend so much of our lives trying to control and define reality, yet the most profound moments often come when we surrender, when we allow ourselves to feel and to see without interference. Looking into the eyes of a dog is one such moment. It is an invitation to step out of the prison of thought and into the living presence of the moment. In that moment, the dog is not an object, not a pet, not a possession. It is a mirror of the eternal, a reflection of the divine spark that animates all life. It is no coincidence that dogs are often used in therapy, particularly for those who have experienced trauma or profound loss. The dog does not speak in the language of intellect. It communicates in the language of presence, touch, and gaze, a language that bypasses the mind and speaks directly to the heart. When a person shattered by grief sits with a dog, something wordless happens. The dog's gaze does not analyze or pity. It simply accepts. This acceptance allows the person to begin to accept themselves, to see that even in their brokenness, they are still worthy of connection. We might ask, why is it that this connection feels so sacred? I believe it is because the dog, in its simplicity, reflects a state of being that is closer to the archetype of wholeness than we are. We are, with our fragmented minds and divided loyalties, often forget what it means to be whole. We chase after success, approval, or perfection, all while neglecting the inner voice that calls us home. The dog does not care about perfection. It cares only for truth, the truth of presence, of affection, of the shared warmth between living beings. To see the self in a dog's eyes is to be reminded of this truth, to be called back to the center of your own being. I remember once observing a dog sitting with its elderly owner, a man who had grown frail and quiet with age. The dog sat at his feet, its eyes fixed on him with a gaze that seemed to say, I see you, not your body, not your age, but you. In that moment, I realized how deeply we crave to be seen in this way. Not as roles or masks, but as souls. The dog does this effortlessly, not because it tries to understand us, but because it is fully itself. It is this authenticity that makes its gaze so powerful. In a world where so many interactions are mediated by masks, the dog's gaze cuts through to the essence. What would it mean for us to live with this same authenticity, to look at others and at ourselves with the same unguarded presence that the dog brings? It would mean confronting our own shadows, our own wildness, our own vulnerability. It would mean accepting that we are not only the polished surface we present to the world, but also the untamed forest of instincts and emotions that lie beneath. The dog, in its quiet wisdom, shows us that these parts of ourselves are not to be feared, but embraced. They are the roots of our aliveness. There is a moment, perhaps you have felt it, when you are alone with a dog and it simply stares into your eyes without blinking. Time seems to slow. You are not thinking about the past or worrying about the future. You are simply there, present, alive. In that moment, the boundaries between species seem to blur. It is as if two souls are meeting in the silence, recognizing one another beyond the confines of form. This, I believe, is a glimpse of the self, the part of us that is beyond identity, beyond words, beyond even the distinction between human and animal. It is the eternal presence that lies at the heart of all life. This presence, which you glimpse in the gaze of a dog, is not foreign to you. It is the same presence that arises in moments of profound stillness. When you sit alone under the vastness of the night sky and feel yourself both insignificant and infinite, the dog reminds you of this state, not by speaking of it, but by living it. It is not concerned with the abstractions that so often dominate human thought: success, failure, reputation. It simply is, and in its being, it calls you back to your own essential nature, the part of you that longs to exist without pretension or fear, to live as a whole, and undivide itself, there is something profoundly archetypal about the relationship between humans and dogs. This bond stretches far back into our collective history, perhaps even into the mists of prehistory, when our ancestors gathered around fires under the protection of watchful hounds. The dog, in those ancient times, was both a guardian and a guide, a creature of instinct who stood at the edge of the wild to warn of unseen dangers. It was both feared and revered, for it possessed a connection to the wilderness that humans were beginning to lose. To this day, a part of us still feels that ancient reverence, though it is often disguised as affection or loyalty. But affection alone does not explain why a dog's gaze can stir something so deep within us. What we encounter in those eyes is not just the animal's affection, but a reflection of our own soul, unmasked, vulnerable, and raw. The dog does not look at you through the lens of human judgment. It does not care if you are rich or poor, successful or broken. It sees you as you are in that moment. It meets you in the present. And this is something we humans rarely do for one another. We are too busy projecting our expectations or fears onto each other, too caught up in the drama of appearances. The dog is a living reminder that presence is enough, that to see and be seen without judgment is one of the deepest forms of connection. I have seen many people who struggle to connect with other humans, but who find a profound sense of intimacy with their dogs. This is not merely because dogs are affectionate, but because they offer a kind of spiritual transparency. They do not hide, they do not lie. When a dog is angry, you know it. When it is joyful, you feel it. As honesty can be both comforting and challenging, for it forces us to confront our own dishonesty, the ways we pretend and hide from our true selves. When a dog looks at you, it does not see the carefully constructed persona you present to the world. It sees through it, straight to the heart of your being. It is said that animals live closer to the archetypes than humans do, that they embody these primal forces without the interference of ego. A dog, for example, can be seen as a living manifestation of the archetype of the companion, the guardian, or even the guide in dreams. A dog may appear when you are in need of protection, or when some part of your unconscious is attempting to guide you through a dark passage of the soul. This is not coincidence. It is the language of the unconscious, speaking to you in the form of an animal that has been your ally since time immemorial. To gaze into a dog's eyes is to step momentarily into this symbolic realm. You are reminded that beneath the surface of daily life there is a world of meaning, a world where every creature and every glance can be a messenger of the soul. The dog's gaze does not ask you to understand this intellectually. It invites you to feel it, to allow the mystery to sink into your bones. It is as though in that moment you are both human and something more than human, a being connected to all life, rooted in the same breath of creation that gives life to every animal, every tree, every star. I have spoken often of individuation, the process by which a person becomes whole by integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of themselves. This journey is not purely intellectual. It requires encounters with the symbolic, with The mysterious with that which awakens the depths of the psyche. Animals, and especially dogs, often serve as companions on this journey. Not because they offer answers, but because they embody qualities we have lost. They teach us how to listen without words, how to sense without analysis, how to be present without fear. To look into a dog's eyes is to be reminded of these qualities, to feel them awaken within you like embers catching fire. There is a strange paradox here. We are the species that claims to have conquered the earth, to have mastered intelligence and reason, yet we turn to a creature of instinct and presence to remind us of what it means to truly live. This is not a sign of our weakness, but of our estrangement from our own roots. We have built walls of thought around our souls, and the dog, in its silent way, tears those walls down. It says to us, be here, be now, be what you are. I recall once standing in the mountains, watching a shepherd with his dogs. There was no need for words between them. The man would glance, Hestur, or whistle, and the dogs moved as though they were extensions of his will, yet also entirely themselves. In their eyes, I saw not subservience, but trust, a deep, wordless bond forged through years of shared life. This trust is what makes the connection between humans and dogs so profound. It is not built on dominance or control, but on a mutual recognition of something sacred, a shared rhythm of existence. When a dog lies at your feet and looks up at you, it is not just seeking affection. It is inviting you to step out of your restless mind and into the simplicity of being. It is asking you to remember that love is not complicated, that presence is enough, that in the quiet exchange of a gaze, there is a universe of understanding. And if you allow yourself to truly meet that gaze, to let go of the masks and pretenses, you may find that what you see reflected there is not only the soul of the dog, but the soul of the world itself. We must not underestimate the power of this reflection in a world obsessed with speed, noise, and distraction. The quiet gaze of a dog is revolutionary. It cuts through the superficial and calls you back to the eternal. It asks nothing of you but authenticity. This is why, for some people, the gaze of a dog is almost overwhelming. It is not just a gaze, it is a mirror. And what it reflects is not always what we want to see, but what we need to see, the unadorned truth of who we are. There is a kind of healing that happens in this encounter. Not the healing of fixing or solving, but the healing of being seen. When the dog looks at you with unwavering attention, it is as if the fragmented pieces of your being are gently drawn together. You do not have to explain your wounds, your failures, your fears. You simply have to be, and in that being, you remember that you are already whole. There is a profound grace in this simple act of being seen without expectation. When a dog looks at you, it does not ask you to be anything other than what you are in that moment. It does not judge the scars you carry or the mistakes you have made. It does not care about the stories you tell yourself about who you should be. It sees you not through the lens of your failures or achievements, but through the unfiltered reality of presence. And in that recognition, something shifts inside you. You begin to see yourself with the same unguarded compassion, as if through the eyes of the self itself, which holds both your light and your darkness without conflict. To live in such a state of presence is not easy for us. We are constantly pulled into the past by regret and into the future by anxiety. We wear our masks so tightly that we forget there is a living soul beneath them. But the dog, by its very nature, exists in the eternal. Now, it does not cling to yesterday's wounds or tomorrow's fears. When you come home after a long absence, the dog greets you not with resentment, but with unrestrained joy. It is as if every moment of reunion is a resurrection, a reminder that love is never bound by time. This is a lesson we desperately need to live not in the illusion of permanence, but in the ever-renewing flow of presence. In the mythic imagination, animals often serve as symbols of the unconscious, that vast, mysterious realm that lies beneath our rational minds. Dogs, in particular, seem to have one foot in the human world and one foot in this deeper instinctual realm. They are both companions and messengers, bridging the gap between our conscious selves and the hidden forces that shape us. When a dog gazes at you with unflinching clarity, it is as though the unconscious itself is peering through, inviting you to acknowledge the parts of your psyche that you have neglected or denied. This invitation can be both comforting and unsettling. To meet the self is to confront all that you are, not just the qualities you admire, but also the ones you avoid. It is to face your shadow, the collection of traits, desire, and memories you have pushed into the dark corners of your mind. A dog, in its natural honesty, holds up a mirror to this shadow. It does not condemn you for it, but it does not let you ignore it either. Its gaze says, I see you, all of you, and you are still worthy of love. This is the essence of individuation, not becoming perfect, but becoming whole, embracing both the light and the dark within. Have you ever noticed how a dog will stare at you when you are in emotional turmoil? As if it knows something you do not. It is not trying to analyze or solve your problems. It is simply present, holding space for your pain without fear or judgment. This kind of presence is deeply healing because it bypasses the intellect and speaks directly to the heart. It reminds you that you are not alone in your suffering, that life itself sees and holds you. In that silent gaze, you may find more comfort than in 1,000 words of advice. There is an ancient wisdom here that modern psychology often overlooks. Healing does not come from dissecting the mind alone. It comes from reconnecting with the deeper layers of the soul. The parts of us that know how to feel, how to trust, how to belong. Dogs remind us of this connection. They do not ask us to be someone else or to hide our wounds. They simply meet us where we are, and in their unwavering presence, we remember the truth of who we are, not the stories we tell, but the living essence that exists beyond them. I've often said that the self is not something we create, but something we uncover. It is the totality of who we are, both known and unknown, conscious and unconscious, shadow and light. When we look into the eyes of a dog, we are offered a glimpse of this totality. We see a being that is whole, not because it is perfect, but because it is authentic. It does not pretend to be other than what it is. In this authenticity, it mirrors the wholeness that lies within us, waiting to be acknowledged. This is why the bond between humans and dogs can feel so spiritual, so sacred. It is not merely a relationship of convenience or affection. It is an encounter with something archetypal, something that touches the deepest layers of the psyche. When you sit quietly with a dog and feel its gaze upon you, you are in conversation with the eternal. You are reminded that you, too, are part of the great web of life, that your soul is not separate from the living soul of the world. In some moments, when a dog looks at you with that still, unwavering gaze, you might even feel as though you are being seen by something divine. This is not because the dog is divine in the way we imagine gods, but because it channels the raw, unfiltered energy of life itself. It lives without the burdens of self-consciousness or the masks of persona. It simply is. And in that state of being, it reflects a truth we all long to return to, the truth of being fully alive, fully present, fully ourselves. The challenge, of course, is to carry this awareness beyond the moment of connection. It is easy to feel whole when looking into the eyes of a dog, but harder to sustain that wholeness in the chaos of human life. Yet, this is exactly what the encounter teaches us. It shows us that beneath all the noise and confusion, there is a stillness we can return to. There is a way of seeing and of being seen that does not depend on performance or approval. It depends only on presence, on the willingness to meet life as it is. Perhaps this is why dogs have been our companions for so long. They are not here merely to guard our homes or fetch our sticks. They are here to remind us of the self, to show us what it means to live in alignment with the deeper truths of existence. They are teachers in fur and breath, guides who lead us not by words but by the purity of their gaze. And when we are wise enough to listen, we begin to remember that the same light that shines in their eyes also shines in ours. So when you next look into the eyes of a dog, pause for a moment. Let yourself be seen, feel the stillness that arises in that exchange. The quiet recognition that you are not just a mind or a role, but the soul. Allow the mystery of that gaze to sink into you, to remind you that life is not something to solve, but something to live. And in that living, let yourself be transformed by the simplest and most profound of truths, that connection. Presence and authenticity are the essence of the self. This is what I mean when I say that there is a mystery in the eyes of a dog. It is not just the mystery of the animal, but the mystery of life itself, reflected back to you in a form that you can recognize and feel. It is the reminder that the soul is not an idea, but a living presence. And that in every gaze, every silent moment of connection, the eternal is speaking to you. The dog, in its gaze, says, you are more than you think you are. You are not separate from the world. You are whole, and if you have the courage to believe it, even for a moment, you will begin to see that the soul connection is not limited to dogs or humans, but extends to all of life. Every tree, every stone, every breath of wind carries the same living essence. The dog is simply a messenger of this truth, a reminder that the self is not a concept to be understood, but a reality to be lived. In the end, what we learn from looking into a dog's eyes is not something we can put into words. It is a feeling, a knowing, a quiet sense of being part of something vast and timeless. It is a realization that the self is not hidden in some distant place, but is here now, in the gaze that meets your own, in the breath that rises and falls, in the simple, undeniable presence of life. And in this realization, we find both humility and strength, both the wideness of the animal and the transcendence of the divine,